Welcome to another 30-minute episode of Account-Based Friday, and thank you for joining us. Each week, my co-host Meg and I, we've been doing this for a few years now. The same time, every week, every Friday, we got great guests, and today's no different. In fact, we're welcoming back Kerry Cunningham from Sixth Sense, who's really the thought leader on research, and he's got some new research that he'll be sharing with us today. So really excited to dig into that in a moment. As people are coming in to today's session, just as a reminder, in the upper corner of your screen, you'll see a QR code. That QR code will drop you to 300 plus best practice go-to-market videos on AI, on account-based, on demand gen, on content, on sales, anything that's go-to-market related. We'd encourage you to like and subscribe to it if you get value from today's discussion. And if there's a specific question that you have, you can always come back to Meg or I, and we can definitely calibrate and point you in the right direction as well. So with that, Meg, do you want to kick things off here with our conversation with Kerry this morning?
Some of the recent studies that you've shared on LinkedIn, and just want to say a thank you to Sixth Sense and to you for going out and gathering, I think, some really, really meaningful and helpful insights for the B2B community. I think you guys are doing tremendous work. So thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today.
I praise. Thank you very much. You just made my day. It's very early.
It's very early where Kerry is. So we're going to ask him really hard questions right off the bat. Kerry, one of the, I think one of the more interesting findings I've seen lately is your work on the 95-5 rule.
Yeah.
Would you want to tell us a little bit about, first of all, for just in case, what is the 95-5 rule? Yep. And what did you find that sort of brings into question what we all thought about it?
Yeah. So the 95-5 rule is, it's based on a piece of research that was done by some academics in Australia. It's really good, solid research, originally done in B2C. And the 95 and 5 refer to their finding that, in general, about 5% of your market, your audience, will be in a buying mode, like, about to buy at any given time, and 95% of it not. And so I think this has been adopted really widely over the last couple of years in B2B, thanks to the B2B Institute at LinkedIn, which kind of helped Ehrenberg Bass port this thing over to B2B. Now, in that research, the researchers provide a formula and a mechanism for figuring out yourself what that percentage of accounts that really are in a buying mode should be. But what I noticed is that most people, of course, don't bother with that. And they just adopt, there's 5% of our audience in market. Now, I think even with that, just at that level, it's probably a good idea for B2B marketers to be thinking that way, because it helps you understand that there is a very small set of accounts that really are going to be in the position to buy from you in the near future. And it's incredibly important to try to figure out which ones those are, because trying to get the rest of them to buy from you is not going to happen immediately in B2B. But the fact of that people adopting this kind of 5% as a rule bugged me, because it would seem to me, if in the paper he's saying 5% are going to buy from you or within this period are really in a purchasing mode. And in B2B, what we know from our other research is the average buying process is about 12 months long. So if 5% are going to buy in this quarter, then there's got to be a lot more that are somewhere in a buying process, but not yet, at the point where they're going to make a decision. And fortunately, you mentioned Sixth Sense. I'm very grateful to be able to do the stuff that I do here, and that they give me that chance. And one of the things that we have is we have a data set when we look across our customers of a record of all of the accounts that they're marketing and selling to. So we took a sample of over 1,000 to start with, but the final kind of sample is about 600 of our customers. And for those customers, a big part of what we do is we use AI to look at the behavioral patterns, and we make predictions about how likely each one of those accounts is to become a pipeline opportunity for our customers. So that's the model we build for our customers each time. And so what it's saying is, if you've got 1,000 accounts, how likely is each one of those 1,000 accounts to become a pipeline deal in the next 90 days? And then we break those out. So the ones that have a low percentage are early stage buyers. And as they get further along, they're later stage buyers. So whether you have an 18-month buying cycle or a 6-month buying cycle, they're early, middle, or late within that cycle. So we can see how many are not in market at all and how many are in market. And then roughly, where are they, beginning, middle, or end? And what our data shows across about 600 customers and their 19 million accounts that they're marketing to is that about 60% of accounts on average, if you just take a slice of that data, any slice, you'll find that about 60% of accounts are not in market. Now, vast majority of our customers are SaaS companies. And when you think about the SaaS world, most customers are on 2-year contracts. So there's 50% of the audience that you would want to sell to, just out of they're in year 1 and they're not in market. And then there's a big chunk that are not in market because they're happy or because the cost of switching or whatever might be very high. So they're not in market either. And so you've got this big chunk, 60% not in market at all. And then you've got 40% that are somewhere in a buying process. But then in a really what I think is a validation of the 95-5 rule in a sense, we organize things into stages. The last 2 stages are decision and then purchase of the buying journey. And between those two, that's about 6% on average across all of our customers. So very close to that 5% number that we're looking at. But only 2% actually in the purchase stage. So it's like, that's like a really small percentage. You've got 40% of accounts that are somewhere in a buying process, but of that, at any given time, only 2% that are really in the last stages of a buying journey, which one tells us that you just cannot miss any of those. And then 2, if what you're doing is really only competing for that last 6% slice, then you're competing over a very small pie, right? And trying to improve your size of that pie. So what we talked about in New York last week when we introduced this research is maybe we ought to be looking at how to get the 34% of accounts that are in market, but not all the way down to that, to keep going in their buying process, right? How do we encourage more buyers to not get despondent, get distracted, not be able to prove the business case and drop out of a buying process? So that's a long explanation of the nature of that, but that's really what that is.
Yeah, it's fascinating research, and you had a lot there in terms of the entire funnel from end to end. If you could just take a moment, I think you called it a dead zone of B2B. Like, how are you defining that dead zone? And then, would love to dig in further into the funnel too, but how are you thinking of that, just out of curiosity?
Yeah. So when you look at, you've got 60% not in market, and then we organize the buying process into 4 more stages. So awareness, consideration, decision, and purchase. Of the whole 40%, 34% on average are in awareness and consideration, and just 6%, as I was saying, in those last 2. So the dead zone is that 34%, right? Because almost all of that drops out before they get to the point where they're actually making a decision about, do I want to buy something? And there's some great research also from LinkedIn they did this with Bain, where they looked at why buying processes end without buying something. And I think somewhere 30 to 40% or so of the reason for that is that the buying group cannot come to an agreement about what they're going to do. Like, they can't come to consensus. Not budget, not business case, but a bunch of people who think they know what they want to do, but they can't agree. And so they stop, right? So to me, we've got an opportunity to do a much better job in identifying those buying groups that are in early stages and helping not just our primary buyer persona, because our primary buyer persona probably understands the business case. They're the ones who started this process. They're the ones who get it. But those other people who are involved in the buying process, the financial guy, the purchasing person, the IT people, helping them understand the business case. If you've got some incredibly new advanced technology or something, your primary buyer persona probably absolutely loves that, but does the CFO? Probably don't care about that. What they want to know is that they're not going to be throwing money out the window. And do you have content that is going to help your buyers, help your primary buyer personas get to the point where the other folks in the organization allow them to move forward and come to an agreement?
Yeah, that brings up, I think, a really important point for marketers to think about, which is, are you doing a good enough job identifying everyone who's part of that decision? And I think that starts with sales, really. But marketing then has kind of a wider set of personas probably that they need to be understanding and engaging.
Right.
Are you seeing companies kind of move more in that direction of being holistic about their buying groups?
Well, I'm starting to see a better recognition that they need to. And, this is very far from a new thing. I mean, when we were back at Serious Decisions, there were a lot of really smart analysts helping a lot of organizations build content for their buyer personas and identifying and defining them and all of that work. So it's not new at all, but I think it's the importance of having messaging, having even brand impressions that make those other people feel comfortable enough, safe enough. Like a big part of that LinkedIn research about why buying processes end had to do with, or even how decisions are made, really has to do with the fact that a buying group is always going to make a more conservative, safer decision than any one person would probably make on their own, right? Your primary buyer persona wants the newest, greatest, latest thing, but they've got to make a decision as a group. And that group is all about de-risking that purchase. And do you have, with your latest, greatest stuff, do you have content, messaging, stories that help those people who are mostly concerned about risk and other things to say yes and to move forward? If you're a big brand and you have a solution in the category and it's established category, much less of an issue. But if you're a smaller brand in a category, then you've got a problem that you've got to make those other people feel safe. If you're in a new category, then it's even a bigger problem because now you've got to convince them that there's a business case for this and all. So, these are, by the way, that Serious Decisions demand type is, still a really important concept for how you think about what you have to do in your marketing here. So anyway, long answer to, I think people understand it. There's more emphasis on it, but we're a long way from doing it well, I think, as a group.
Just thinking about how you're framing up the buyers group and kind of the dynamics there. And I was at the CMO Summit of Pavilion last week, and there was some debate about this. There was one presenter that showed, and I'd be curious about your point of view if you dove deeply into kind of the buyer group size.
Yeah.
There's one school of thought automatically like, okay, in this environment, this crazy environment that we're all in, it's expanding without a doubt across all ACVs. There was someone else that showed some research that showed that, and I don't remember the exact numbers, let's call it from 11 to 14, but on the larger end for enterprise purchases or bigger purchases, without a doubt, the buyers group was expanding. But they also showed research that said in smaller ACV, more transactional, the buyer group was actually shrinking. Have you seen or done any research, or do you have a point of view on what you're seeing there related to this?
Yeah. Year over year, we see small incremental change. I think anybody who tells you that things are massively changing year to year, it doesn't really work that way.
Right.
It's just things are incrementally changing a little bit. So we've seen a change from globally large average across everybody from 11 to 11 and a half people in a buying group. But down on the low end, I don't expect that number to go down. We haven't seen it go down. And by the way, even like in our 10 to 50,000 annual value category, the buying group size is 8. It's not like 2 or 3. and this is reported by people in the buying group. So this is people saying, yeah, this is how many people I had to work with in this process. And it aligns pretty well when we ask marketers what their buying groups are. We get more or less the same numbers now. We didn't used to. Like when I first started doing this, we got very different numbers from marketers that were much smaller. But now we get numbers that tell us that marketers really understand their buying groups much better than they have.
So maybe that's a good moment, because you mentioned using AI to help you do some of your analysis.
Yeah.
You've also done some research on marketing investment in AI. Would love to hear, what are some of the findings that you think are particularly important for marketers to see or hear? And anything surprise you out of that study?
Yeah, I think, if you are just embedded in the conversation on LinkedIn and elsewhere in B2B, and I talk to tons and tons of marketers, you would think that everybody is investing in AI. That was, what I expected to see. And what we actually saw was slightly over half of organizations have specifically budgeted AI. Let's make sure that we're bringing AI into our marketing practice. And so that was like 55%, I think, or something like that. So that was surprised me that it was so low. And I think it's really important for us, as if you're thinking of yourself as a marketer, to remember that the people that you talk to all day, every day are not everybody. And if they're on, this is just like with politics, right? If they're on LinkedIn and they're talking to you about it, they are not normal right now. That's not how everybody operates. It's probably how more people operate than they used to, but there's a whole world of people out there who are not spending all day monitoring LinkedIn for conversations about these things. And so what they're doing is different. And so that's one. The other one, we asked, all right, so is this budget coming? Is this additional budget, or is this coming from something else? 50-50 split on that. So, in a lot of cases, in about half the cases, something is suffering because we're going out to add AI to something. And there does seem to be, of course, an expectation that we're going to add AI and it's going to make everything else better. And that seems, if half people are budgeting, they're putting, they're taking budget from other places and they're putting it toward AI. I think that's telling you that they expect to get more from what they're already doing with that AI. But when you look at the specific application, so we asked that about like 9 different applications of AI. None of them are particularly well subscribed at this point. And the one that's got the most users, not surprisingly, is content creation. And I think I get these numbers right off the top of my head, but I think it was like 55, 58%, something like that, of people said they were using AI for content creation. We asked, how confident are you that it's going to help you hit your goals this year? And that one was underwater. Only about 40-something% of people thought that was going to help hit goals. So people are doing it, I think, largely because it's available and you can, and they have some mandate to go out and use AI, but they're not really expecting to get much from it. Kind of a bummer, that approach. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, like about the same number or more people thought that automating process with AI would be super helpful, but it's not very well invested in. I think less than 40% of organizations are doing anything in that realm. I think that is probably a place where we're going to get a lot of gains from AI. It's just starting to really automate processes and take humans out of the boring, repetitive, error-prone loops and those kinds of things. But I think because those are probably a little more complicated to implement, they're not as well subscribed yet. So those are a couple of the things that I think are important for everybody to understand.
Your comment about how we as marketers, we get sometimes in our own bubble and talking about this AI 100% foots to an experience that I've also had here locally. And, recently I moved from the New York area to Nashville. I belong to a poker group, and there's a president and a COO that are members of our group. And I asked them that same question about AI and adoption. And one worked in manufacturing, the other in accountancy. and neither one of them, like it, and a third actually was a general manager for a car dealership. All three of them across the board, it was like AI. Like, what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I use it to make a better email. In the meantime, I come from I go to a lot of the conferences, the B2B conferences, and it's like a frenzy around AI. So I 100% agree with you that sometimes we kind of get locked in on a perspective and thinking everybody's adopting it, when in fact, maybe a lot of our marketers are adopting it because we're under a lot of pressure and a lot of pressure for budget, which actually leads me to my question of, as part of that research that you did, I think there was some surveying done about budgets.
Yeah.
What are you seeing, and any surprises there in terms of budget, and how AI foots to that, either the technology budget, or is it going to become its own budget at some point in time?
The report that we wrote begins with an introduction about the negativity bias, both online and in the press. And I think that that's something that I've seen a number of times now, where so I've been asking about I've been asking the question, how did your company do financially last year, in every survey we've done for the last 3 years. And it's always better than whatever you hear. And, when we ask about company growth, it's always better than whatever you hear. When we asked about budgets, it was much better than what you would expect, as in, budgets are growing on average. Well, let's put it this way: 96% of marketing budgets in our survey grew. Now, the most common growth level was, down in the 5 to 10% range, depending upon which segment you're looking at. So not a lot of growth, and maybe that only keeps up with inflation. But that is not the same thing as shrinking. It's clearly not. We've been through shrinking, and that's different. And then, there are quite a few companies that did experience strong growth and did have increased budgets. So when we saw the numbers that came back and said, companies grew and budgets grew pretty substantially, we were super skeptical. And I don't want to go out and say stuff that makes people laugh at me. So, we went to ChatGPT and said, pull 150 financial records from public companies, technology companies, manufacturing companies, and others. We went to friends in VC and PE firms and said, what can you tell us about your companies and how they performed? And then we compared internally different sources. So we had sources where, some were our customers, some were LinkedIn and those other sources, and some were panel survey responses. And there are differences between how those audiences reported, but every audience had growth in both revenue and budget. And the biggest growth area that we saw was from a PE firm, portfolio companies, and it's not what you expect necessarily. So I think that was real, right? And we took pretty great pains to make sure that we weren't going to be going out and saying stuff that people would just laugh at. But it is different than what you hear all the time, and so I think it's important to, again, just a grain of salt. If you're in the LinkedIn universe all the time and you go to marketing events, you're going to hear a lot of things. Mostly what you're going to hear. I won't say mostly what you're going to hear, but there's a bias toward the negative, and that isn't necessarily how things are going. And I think it matters because, we feed off each other. And when everybody is hearing and doing negative things, then maybe we decide, we're not going to budget for that thing this year. We're not going to spend that money. And when you do, one of your comrades who's out on LinkedIn telling you that things were going well now says, oh yeah, but we got a bunch of deals that fell through. Right? We don't want to be our own worst enemies. And I've heard a lot of that.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. And we also had Ray Reich from Benchmark on a couple of weeks ago, and he said the same thing. His study found the same thing, that budgets were going up.
Yep.
And also that companies who did invest more grew more. And if so, that sort of stands to reason too, right? If everyone is in fact investing in marketing at a reasonable level, and then it would suggest that they should also have good performance, assuming other things that need to be in place are doing that. But with that in mind, what are some other areas of marketing investment you think that probably don't get enough coverage in our LinkedIn and other sources?
Well, so I'll tell you the two places. So we asked, within marketing, what departments were most likely to get increases, and it's demand gen and digital marketing. And so those two were far more likely than any others to get to see increases in budget. So I don't think that that's bad. But I think, and this is really where I've been focusing a lot of attention lately, the emphasis on brand and B2B. So, brand gets so we asked, how much do you spend on brand? How much do you spend on demand and ABM combined? We combined those two things and said, what percentage of brand is that? And it's about 25% or so. So, and that's about, I think what most people would kind of say. And everything that we just said about, earlier when we talked about the 95.5 and all of that, there's some other data there that would help us understand that we need to pay a lot more attention to brand. And like specifically, one of the things that we found in our other research is, and this is a replication of a Bain study. And the questions we asked were, one, did you know the brands that you were about to evaluate in advance? Did you already have experience with them? 95% of the time, buyers, no matter who they are, what role, what level, say, yeah, I know at least one of them. And then how many of the companies you were going to evaluate did you have on the short list on day one? And it's 4 out of the 5, which tells you that 4 out of the 5 brands were known to somebody in the buying group on day one. It also tells you that, and how often did you buy from one of those 4 that were on the day one shortlist? And that's 85% of the time in our study. I think it was closer to 90 in the Bain study. So if you're not on the shortlist on day one, which might be 12 months from when that thing turns into revenue, if you're not on the shortlist on day one, you are not going to win the deal. I mean, you've got a 15% chance at best. So one, you better get on the day one shortlist. And if you're a small brand, you're in a new category, something like that, that means you've got work to do on brand awareness. You've got work to do in making sure that people can associate you with that business problem that you're trying to solve. But most B2B companies are actually not in that category. So 75% or so of purchases from our research are in categories that the company already owns. So I'm going out to buy something. We already have something in this category. We're replacing it. We're upgrading. We're doing something else. But I know the category. We can put 4 of the 5 vendors we're going to evaluate on the short list on day one. I've got personal experience with many of them. I'm in my 40s, 50s, or 60s. I've been through 5 or 6 or 10 cycles for this thing in the past. I know this category well. So the problem isn't for them awareness. It's, are buyers thinking about you in the way that you want them to be thinking about you now? Does the fact that, if you're one of the big 3-letter brands or something, you're going to be on the short list. But maybe you're on the short list only because you have to be put on the short list to be taken seriously. And then, they don't really like your brand, which is, I think, a lot of bigger B2B brands are kind of in that position right now. And we don't think we have to do anything about that. We don't think in B2B that we have to be likable. We don't think that we have to be people or a brand that people want to hang out with. But how in the world are the human beings who are buying in B2B any different from the human beings who are buying anywhere else? And to me, we had a modest likelihood that brand budgets were increasing this year. And I think we got to correct that. I think the ones who correct that are going to do well. I guess I would say that.
It looks like we got a comment here echoing your sentiment here from Lenice, who's been a longtime listener. Thank you, Lenice, for contributing about the balance between brand and demand. That was a hot topic that we also went through a Pavilion CMO Summit last week. It's such a delicate balance, and really the net of it was brand was a long-term investment, whereas demand was kind of like the right now investment. But maybe last question on my side, because I know we're pressing against time here. In your experience with the budget, and you had mentioned kind of, lack of better words, like an echo chamber of it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of do more with less. And in fact, their budgets are growing. Yet at the same time, we hear the cost of acquisition for customer CAC is may not be sustainable. It's inflating across sales, marketing, customer success. Do you have any predictions there about what might happen going into the rest of the year? Or I know we're in kind of like this wonky period right now with what day of the week it is, and do we have tariffs? Do we not have tariffs in the U.S.? So that type of thing. But any thoughts about the CAC side of things?
Well, I'm going to say this will be the most radical thing I say probably this year. But I think almost all of the money we spend on what I think of now is good old fashioned demand gen, get people to fill out forms and chase after them with BDRs. I think it's almost all a waste of money. So that's, what we need to be doing instead. Like if you're getting people to come to your website, first of all, vast majority of them will never fill out a form no matter what. That's just a really crappy, bad way to identify who's in market. But the fact of you chasing after people with a BDR does not change what that buyer is going to do. It simply doesn't. It captures ones who decide, okay, now I'm ready to talk to somebody. But that only happens after they've been in market for quite a long time and have decided that you're on the list. And I'm not even saying that we shouldn't have people doing outreach, but the outreach cannot be about getting a meeting. That is a waste of money. It's annoying as hell. And I just ask every marketer, like, think of the last time a 25-year-old calling and emailing you changed your behavior. Right? I mean, has it ever happened? And I think the answer is no. But if it does happen, it's because they present you with some information, they deliver some content or experiences or something that helps you in your role, helps you in your buying process, that improves your work life. And so it raises the view of your brand and makes it more likely that they'll prefer you. But the get a meeting part, we don't have time for my pigeon analogy, but we think we're causing people to interact with us when we call them. We're not. They do that when they're ready, and that's all there is to that. So we can save money there. Let's do that differently. And then we can stop annoying people also, which is a good thing.
That's always a good goal for marketing. Stop annoying people. Let's aim high.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I do think we are at time. Kerry, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing some, I think, really helpful insights, including don't be annoying as a good mantra for all marketing. Any last notes or comments for us before we send people back out into their Fridays?
Yeah, I mean, all of our research is available you can go sixcents.com/research, which will get you to, we call it the science of B2B, and I'll get you there. And we have no forms on that. So all of the research is there and available. So check it out. And it really is intended to help marketers win the discussions they're having internally about how to go about their business. Because almost every marketer I talk to knows that they need to do more and better brand and knows they should stop annoying people, but they're getting pressure from other parts of the organization to do it. And really my mission in life is to give you the ammunition you need to have that discussion internally.
Yeah. Well, and thank you again for doing some of this great work. We've been working this month to bring, some of the best of B2B data from a few different sources, and again, wouldn't have been complete without having you join us. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And
I appreciate that.
Lots of good reading.
Yeah, Kerry, you do amazing work for the industry. So thank you for not only the work, but joining early, because I know it's a little bit on the early side there in California. So thank you for investing the time again.
My pleasure.
Because it's been a couple times that you've come back now. I think second or third that you've been back. So thank you for that as well. So and then we do this each week, same time, same place. Although next week
except not next week.
Except next week. So, but if you got any value from today, this is part of our live broadcast here, just kind of winging it. Yeah, we're traveling next week, but if you got any value from today's session, we'd encourage you to share this with a friend or like and subscribe in the upper corner. My camera mirrors things in weird ways here, but yeah, we would encourage you to like and subscribe or share with a friend, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next episode.
All right. Thanks, everybody, and happy Friday.